Once again, the modern Greek tragedy known as the rise and fall of Donald Trump. And it's been broadcast for all to see. The former 45th president of the United States of America was charged last week, actually I guess it was Tuesday, in an indictment on 37 counts for mishandling classified information and withholding them from a grand jury. Mike, supporters of the former president claim that this is an unprecedented and corrupt indictment of Trump and a brazen election interference, as he is the likely Republican nominee. And in addition, it is just another of President Biden's further transforming the FBI and the Justice Department into political enforcers. But can there be two truths at the same time? Can Trump be the target of politically motivated investigation, but also guilty of mishandling government secret documents?
Well, I suppose that could be a reality. I mean, clearly the mishandling of documents took place. We've got information there. He's been indicted on that. We'll let the court bear that out to see, to actually prove that to be true or not. The political piece, I mean, the challenge I always struggle with here is he makes the political element before anybody else even gets there. So he makes it political before any charges are even put out, and so I think that it's really hard because and I give him credit for this, and I struggle to give him credit for anything. He is great at spin. He is great at trying to figure out how to frame things in such a way so that he's already politicized it and trying to put that story out there in a way that's got everybody on their haunches before they ever figure out how to respond. And so I give him credit for that. And at some point, the rest of us have got to figure out how to get as good at that as he is. Otherwise, he continues to, as you say, be the Greek tragedy that keeps showing up because he gets there before people and he's more brazen than anyone else isn't getting there.
Well, unfortunately, there's a life cycle in the Greek tragedy, and I'll get to that in a second. But Mark, several of the charges that Trump is facing are related to efforts to hide the documents in his possession and keep them away from federal investigators. Now, before I wrote this script, it was announced that Trump rejected the advice of attorneys to negotiate a settlement with the Department of Justice, and he still withheld the documents. There's something wrong here.
Well, I think there's a cliche that deserves to be repeated here, which is it's not the crime that gets you, it's the cover-up. And this is a classic example of the charges that he has for obstruction of justice, for lying to investigators, for not responding. Those are independent of the underlying, withholding of the documents, which are serious in and of themselves. But you don't have to get him on that to get him on the obstruction of justice. And across the board in scores of white collar crimes, that's been the sort of the underlying criminal act that has landed people in jail. And so it's foolhardy. And when you've had legal advice through the entire process, sometimes that's the reason people may talk to investigators and get themselves in trouble. But he had legal advice through the entire process, and he chose to ignore it. It's just incredible.
I mean, I'm thunderstruck by this because all he had to do was hand over the documents and to avoid criminal charges. He didn't have to do anything other than hand him over and get him back. He could get him back. My goodness, the Presidential Records Act would allow him to get them back.
And that is actually the incredible thing, which is that these documents frequently rest with the library or the office of the former president. But that said, it's under the auspices or custody of the federal government. And that wasn't done in this case. But A and B, he lied about, misrepresented what was going on to investigators.
Mike.
No, I think the part that continues to stun me is how quickly the wagons were drawn, right? So the circle was drawn in, and so that all of a sudden we've got, if you've got to already announce that you're going to pardon him if you're running as one of the Republican nominees. So that becomes a thing, which is ridiculous. That you've got people saying that, well, at least he obviously isn't a spy. we're not, people who are fully apprised of what the Espionage Act says and should do. It has nothing to do with necessarily whether or not you're a spy. It governs a lot more beyond that. But, so you've got people like Lindsey Graham who are basically saying, well, he's of course not a spy. Well, that's completely meaningless and irrelevant. So it's amazing to me how the wagons have been circled and people are defending this, and it's ludicrous.
Well, going back to my analogy of the Greek tragedy, in ancient Greek, in Greek drama, you had a central character who was filled with hubris and who was arrogant, and his arrogance led him to his fall and led him to nemesis, which was punishment. And I'm sure that this is the next step, and maybe it's the first step for Donald Trump, because he's been able to avoid punishment up till now. But my guess is that, he can complain all he wants about Hillary this and, Hillary that, and Biden this and Biden that. But at the end of the day, I think he's going to find himself in hot water and be convicted for some of these offenses.
Well, no, I think you're right. I mean, even Pence, the big distinction is they all gave them back. Once they were identified, they returned them. It was not an issue. They acknowledged, and this was a problem, and we gave it back. And that's, I guess, the line that's out there that people seem not to be able to understand.
Mark, the last word.
I was going to say, one of his political strengths since 2015 has been as a disruptor of breaking down norms and shaking things up in completely unexpected ways. There does come a point where you do a little bit too much disruption and put yourself in legal peril, and that is where he is right now.
Well, I hope for the nation it gets resolved, and it gets resolved quickly. We're able to go on to better things.